Welcome. Our psalm for today, Psalm 21, fits in very well with the previous psalm, Psalm 20, which we looked at recently in one of these talks. In Psalm 20, David is preparing to go into battle. He's presenting his requests, his prayers before God. He's putting his trust in God to defend him in battle. And then in the psalm that we're looking at today, Psalm 21, there is a rejoicing after the success in battle, that God has rescued David from death and from danger and brought him to safety and to honour and to success. And as David speaks of that great victory, his attention is drawn. David is a prophet as well as a king. His attention is drawn to God's perfect king, the Messiah or the Christ. And David speaks in prophecy about how the Christ, the Messiah, will rule. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks, how you can understand the King James Bible using the book of Psalms. Each time we look at a different psalm, verse by verse and word by word, seeking to understand its meaning. Psalm 21 then has the heading, To the Chief Musician, a Psalm of David. And whenever we see that reference to the chief musician, we're reminded that these psalms were written for the public worship of God at the temple, God's house in Jerusalem, where the music was presided over by the chief musician, the leader of the worship in the temple. Verse 1, The king shall joy in thy strength, O Lord, and in thy salvation how greatly shall he rejoice. How different that is from the military leaders and the rulers who win a victory in war today. They rejoice in how well they've done. They rejoice in the power of their army, in the strength of their weapons and their military equipment. David didn't rejoice in his own strength. He rejoiced in the strength that came from God. He didn't claim that he was a great and powerful man. He declared how great and powerful God was. He spoke about God's salvation, the way that God rescues people. That salvation had come from God, and it was God who rescued David in the battle. No wonder how in thy salvation, how greatly shall he rejoice, as he says. Verse 2, Thou hast given him his heart's desire, and hast not withholden the request of his lips. The request of his lips, his prayer. God hasn't withholden it. God hasn't held it back from him. He's not held back from him the answer to that prayer. No, God gave to David the answer to his prayer. He gave him success in battle, and that was David's heart's desire. It was what David truly desired in his heart. And not that David was desiring this contrary to what God wanted, but rather that David wanted what God wanted, and God gave it to him. And with that thought, David pauses with word Selah, probably means a musical pause, and then leads in to the next verse. Verse 3, For thou preventest him with the blessings of goodness, thou settest a crown of pure gold on his head. Preventest. To prevent. Today it means to stop. In the King James Bible, it has the old meaning, to go before. David is saying God went before him with the blessings of goodness. How kind and how good God is, how generous he is with the way he gives to help his people. And David was going into that battle, that fierce and dangerous battle, but God was going before him, pouring out the blessings of goodness. Thou settest a crown of pure gold on his head. Yes, David received from God honour and wealth and blessings and goodness. How different this is from how it seemed on that day before the battle, when David was preparing, when David prayed to God. Verse 4, he asked life of thee. David prayed for his own life to be preserved. And what did God do? And thou gavest it him, even length of days forever and ever. God didn't just give David life. God gave David eternal life, that David should always live with God in heaven and the New Jerusalem. He had life on this earth, abundant life, a blessed life, and a blessed life forevermore after his life on this earth was complete. And so David speaks of himself here, but he's looking forward to the rule of God's perfect King, the Messiah. God's perfect King who truly will rule forever and ever. And, for that to be possible, God must defeat the power of death. God must make it so that Messiah's rule can continue. And God doesn't just defeat the power of death for the purpose of the rule of Messiah, or for Messiah's benefit alone. God defeats the purpose of death for all God's people. When Messiah rules, that will be the days of the resurrection, the days when God's people who have died in this world in the past will live again, never to die again. God is restoring all things. Paul says the last enemy to be defeated is death. When Messiah rules, his perfect rule will be for the benefit of the whole world and everyone in it. Verse 5, David speaking firstly of himself again, but also thinking of the Messiah. His glory is great in thy salvation. Honour and majesty hast thou laid upon him. Okay, so the King David in the first instance, receives glory and honour and majesty. 3 words with a similar sort of meaning. There is a distinction, though, between them, because honour in particular means greatness in the Hebrew, and majesty means beauty and magnificence. So there is a distinction, but the richness of this verse is just in the beauty of these wonderful things that God has given to David. God gave David salvation, safety, and then he poured out on him these blessings of glory and honour and majesty. Verse 6, for thou hast made him most blessed forever. Thou hast made him exceeding glad with thy countenance. The word countenance really means the face. God's smiling on his king. God showing his approval. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And that the quotation I've given refers to the Son of God, the Messiah, to Christ. But it's equally true of David. David was like the Son of God, upon whom God had shown his favour. Verse 7, for the King trusteth in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High he shall not be moved. Where was David's security? Was it in himself or in his army? No, it was in his trust in the Lord, and in his trust in God's kindness, God's mercy poured out upon him, so that the king, David, should not be moved. He wouldn't lose his position. He wouldn't be disturbed by the troubles in the world, and especially by the troubles that his enemies were causing. The psalm changes at this point. Up to this point, when it refers to thou, it's talking to God. The subject is that God is doing these wonderful things for David. But now, from verse 8, the speaker is God, and he's speaking to the king, to David, or to the Messiah. And so, from verse 8, God is speaking. Thine hand shall find out all thine enemies. Thy right hand shall find out those that hate thee. So God is saying that the king will be successful in defeating all his enemies. He'll search for those enemies, find them out, and he'll act against them, and act against them in power. That's why it says thine hand and thy right hand. It's like you used to hold a sword in your right hand. Your hand represents your strength and your power. It's saying God is giving his king power over his enemies to defeat them, and to defeat them totally. Verse 9, thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger. As a fiery oven, or a furnace. And how terrible it must have seemed when people baked bricks or used a furnace for the purpose of purifying metal, and they heated up this fire to this tremendous heat. And at what distance do you need to be from it to be safe? How dangerous this fire is. And yet these enemies, they're made as a fiery oven, as if they're to be thrown into that terrible oven. That's how completely the enemies are to be destroyed. Then it continues, the Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath. Now, it's not just a matter of David being angry and punishing and killing his enemies. It's a matter of the Lord acting against them. God himself is acting against them. It says swallow them up because the word picture is drawn from the way a fierce wild animal might swallow its prey alive, just swallow it whole. And it's describing how sudden the punishment, the end of the power of those enemies will be. And when we think of the Messiah and who his enemies principally are, the devil, death, the grave, God is acting against those enemies. And they may seem all-powerful or so powerful in our world today. There may seem to be no answer to the power of death and the grave, and no way we can defeat the devil. But God has greater power, and God, when he acts against them, will swallow them up. And so when King Messiah comes to the time of his rule, then the total defeat of those enemies is certain. As it says at the end of verse 9, the fire shall devour them. Those enemies are defeated, their success forever put to an end. This is what Psalm 2 and verse 9 is saying, again, of the Messiah. Thou shalt break them, the enemies. With a rod of iron thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Yes, just as David, God gave him success and allowed him to defeat his enemies totally, so King Messiah gets that success, that tremendous success, that these enemies will be defeated, never to rise again, never to be successful again, that nothing that is evil can enter into Messiah's kingdom. The evil powers, people manipulating people, people dealing cruelly with people, this all must come to an end as Messiah defeats every evil force in this world. And how complete is that defeat? You can kill an enemy, but if his sons continue to fight against you, you've not really succeeded. You can kill an enemy, but if the results of his work are already stirring up trouble for you, then the loss of that one person is not enough. And verse 10 shows that Messiah's success is much more than the success against individuals who are causing trouble. It's against the results of their work, against the continuance of their work. Let's look at it. Verse 10, their fruit shalt thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men. Okay, if we look at, say, wheat, it seems very difficult to distinguish between fruit and seed, because the seed is the fruit. But if you think of an apple, for example, then we distinguish between the fruit which we eat and the seed which we don't. Maybe we plant the apple seed, but probably we throw it away. But think about an apple now. Think about what its seed is for and what its fruit is. Its seed is what you plant for future generations of apple trees. Its fruit is the result of the plant's work through the year. So where it says here, their fruit shalt thou destroy from the earth, we're talking about the results of the work of these evildoers. Evildoers always set in place evil schemes and evil plans. But those plans are destroyed. Those plans cannot continue. The effect they wanted to have in this world, it will not happen. Not when God's King defeats those enemies. And the seed, those who would continue that evil work, the sons of the wicked man who do the things that their father did, they're stopped too, because their seed shalt thou destroy from among the children of men. So the results of that work defeated, and no one left to continue it. That's our word pictures here. Verse 11, for they intended evil against thee. They imagined a mischievous device, which they are not able to perform. They intended evil against God's King. They intended to do cruel things to the one whom God has appointed. But God has acted to defeat their plans. They imagined, they thought of a mischievous device. Mischievous means extremely bad, and device here means a plan. They made this extremely bad plan, but they can't carry it out. They're not able to perform it because God has given strength to his King. Verse 12 is a word picture from a battle, maybe like the battle David just fought. Therefore shalt thou make them turn their back when thou shalt make ready thine arrows upon thy strings against the face of them. So the enemy marches into battle, facing towards you. How fierce they look. But you've got your archers there with their bows and their arrows. And when they start shooting their arrows, the enemy turns their back. They turn their back towards you. They start to run away. They suddenly realize that they are defeated and that proud and fierce attack they organized against you has become utter defeat. That's what's going on here in the language of this. Yes, David has won a battle, but it's not the final battle. There are still troubles for David, but David can call upon God's support and God's help in those. But even after the defeat of all David's enemies, there will still be evil in this world. There will still be trouble in this world until the day when King Messiah is to rule. And in that day, every enemy, even the last enemy, even death, will be defeated, because King Messiah has to rule as God's perfect king, and will be king forever and forever into the ages of the ages. And so, in verse 13, the psalm concludes, turning its attention not to David, but to God. David says, Be thou exalted, O God. Be thou exalted, Lord. Lord, the sacred name of God. Praying that God will be exalted, that he will have the highest place, the place of honour. David doesn't want the place of honour for himself. He wants God, the Lord, to receive that honour. Be thou exalted, Lord, in thine own strength. Oh yes, it's not David's strength that gives authority to God. It is God's strength that gave authority to David. So will we sing and praise thy power. Please write to me. My email address is 333kjv@gmail.com. My name again is Keith Simons. I'd like to know which country you're in, or which of the states, if you're in the United States, as most of our listeners seem to be. The email address again, 333kjv@gmail.com. And in conclusion, let me read you the whole of Psalm 21. To the chief musician, a psalm of David. The king shall joy in thy strength, O Lord, and in thy salvation how greatly shall he rejoice. Thou hast given him his heart's desire, and hast not withholden the request of his lips. Selah. For thou preventest him with the blessings of goodness. Thou settest a crown of pure gold on his head. He asked life of thee, and thou gavest it him, even length of days forever and ever. His glory is great in thy salvation. Honour and majesty hast thou laid upon him. For thou hast made him most blessed forever. Thou hast made him exceeding glad with thy countenance. For the king trusteth in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High he shall not be moved. Thine hand shall find out all thine enemies. Thy right hand shall find out those that hate thee. Thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger. The Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them. Their fruit shalt thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men. For they intended evil against thee. They imagined a mischievous device which they are not able to perform. Therefore shalt thou make them turn their back, when thou shalt make ready thine arrows upon thy strings against the face of them. Be thou exalted, Lord, in thine own strength. So will we sing and praise thy power.